Hello, and welcome to the Canyon Chasers podcast that we've affectionately called the Braking Zone. I am extremely excited about today's episode. We have two very influential riders on the podcast today. We have Nick Ienatsch, who is the lead instructor for Yamaha Champions Riding School, but he's a longtime moto journalist. He's an author. He's a national championship winning racer. We also have the one and only three-time world champion Freddie Spencer, who is often regarded as one of the greatest road racers of all time. He has really made a name for himself by winning the GP250 and the GP500 series in the same year, which in today's speak would be the equivalent of winning MotoGP and Moto2 in the same year, which would be absolutely unheard of. He went on to start the Freddie Spencer High Performance Riding School, which became the Yamaha Champions Riding School. And they sat down with us. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm really excited that you guys both agreed to do this. I think you guys are both, I'm not really one for like hero worship or adoration, but you guys both had a pretty significant impact early on in the kind of rider I wanted to be. Nick, with your journalism, Motorcyclist magazine, like your alcohol article hit me at the exact right time. So
there you go. Right. Positive outcome.
And the pace, the pace changed everything. And I was so impressed when you wrote the Pace 2.0, where you revised it. And then, of course, Mr. Spencer, the last man to win 250 and 500 in the same year. I mean, that's amazing. Anyway, so like some of the things I was hoping we could kind of talk about today, I'd like to ask you a couple questions about your early career. I think it's always interesting. Freddie, you started racing at the ripe old age of 4, I believe, and then kind of a key message I was kind of hoping to get out of this podcast. All the time we hear, well, that's a racing technique or whatever. And I wanted to talk about why racing matters so much. That I've always argued that it's as close as we get to scientific evidence because it is measurable and because it is repeatable and stuff like that. But I'm sure you guys could say that way better than I can.
Well, racing, listen, I've said this many times. I learned everything basically I know about riding a motorcycle in my yard as a kid. That comes from what you said about the repeating aspect of it. You look at anybody that's successful at something and that can do things in a consistent way comes from the dedication of practice, not just the physical aspect of practicing, but the mental aspect of it and going through the same procedure over and over. It's also how you make those steps. You build your sequences of what you do, and you develop the feel. Riding a bike is as we know, and I'm sure to about it, it's about the analytical and the practical side, the technical side of understanding not only the inputs but also how the bike works and blending those. But it's really about what you develop in the trust side, and that's the enjoyment side. But it's also the performance side, and performance, side doesn't have to be so much about speed, but in how you achieve the self-achievement of none of us are perfect, and you'll never do it perfectly, but getting to that point to where you have that tight control, and that is developed in my case from racing.
Now, I've heard a story, and I don't know if it's true, that when you were a kid trying to understand the bike, that you would go out on your motorcycle in the mud and practice with the front brake and just falling over. Is that a true story? Is that how driven you were at that age?
In Louisiana, the weather changes all the time. It's like yesterday, it's 8 and 30 degrees, and today it's going to be 60. So but I was always different conditions. And so what I would do, and normally is I had a hose, long hose, got my mom to buy me this long hose, and I would wet one edge of the corner. I had a little oval. I had many different little layouts around through the trees and things. But this one particular area I had layout, and I would practice front end pushing and sliding and rotating the bike. And I would change my lean angles based on my grip level and how quickly I get the bike. And where that came from is I would watch the older guys like Robert E. Lee and even my brother and like Daryl Hurst and Mike Gerald and all these riders and Guy McClure, Mike Kidd, They were all riders that raced the Rolls Downs, and I would watch them, how they rotate the bike. I watched King 72. First time I saw him, about how he used both wheels to get the bike drifting and then slowed and picked up and changed the direction. So I would watch the other guys. Now, I'm not sitting there saying I understood exactly, but I would try to emulate it, and then I would feel what it felt like, and that's what I remember. So yes, I told a story about, I'd go in and crash until I figured out the lean angle, the speed, stop crashing, right? And I understood the grip level. But yeah, that's what I would do. I would just practice those different, what I would see, and then I would try to incorporate it on a much smaller scale in what I was doing, and it taught me again bike control, how the bike worked. And the most sad at that age is just intuitive.
So you were 4 when you did your first. Was this something as a little kid you were just fascinated by motorcycles, and it was just something you had to do, or?
My dad had always loved bikes. I mean, he was like Marlon Brando in high school. I got pictures of him with the cap on and the leather jacket. Oh yeah, he loved bikes. And so my dad was like almost 40 when I was born, and so it was just local racing. And my brother and him would race a little bit, and I tagged along. I want to do that, and so they got me in little Briggs and Stratton. That's how it started. I had a little track outside Dallas called Lake Lavon, and I finished dead last my first race. It was an absolute disaster. Got lapped. And my dad would tell the story. I don't remember that part of it, but he said I come in, I was completely on the limit. Like there's no way, and I want a bike, and I was very driven, and I think, it's not uncommon, when it's something that is ultimately, I believe this, my passion, my purpose, and I was relentless in my desire to want to get better at it.
I've always kind of thought that you have to have the stars align, right? You have to have the desire, you have to have the talent and the aptitude, and you have to have the opportunity. And, a lot of us have 2, but not very many of us get all 3.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I've said many times, they said, well, what makes a great champion? I said, well, the desire, is one, but, and then your work ethic, because there's going to be times along the way, and I went through it. I've said, someone asked me about being burned out. I said I was burned out in 1979. 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, and racing sometimes 15 races a weekend for 40 weekends a year.
Oh my gosh!
Oh yeah, I mean, relentless. I never got tired. I'd ride 5 road race bikes a day. There was a point in 75 and 76, 77 where I was riding an RD400 and a TZ 750. Same day, back to back. I'd ride anything. I'd love to. I'd win on both, any of them. I would just go and go and go. I would take my helmet off. I could ride like that because of all those 5 hours a day of riding. I developed the skill to be able to, I'd work with the motorcycle so well. The motorcycle did most of the work for me. I would just input at the right times, So those skills, natural ability, and you couldn't be more correct on opportunity. You have to want to believe. I remember at the match races that I was walking with Dale Singleton. We were walking under this for the first race on that Good Friday in 80. And he goes, aren't you nervous? I go, not really. I mean, I've worked my entire life together. I was ready, and I went out and won the race, beat Kenny and Barry. And, you got to feel like that you are up to that moment and up to that thing. And that's where there's a difference between arrogance and confidence. I am the most, I never assume anything. I never expect, that I'm going to do it. So I've worked tirelessly, That is one of the biggest things. If you walk down a track day, you walk down a club race, you walk down a Grand Prix, it's much different. Grand Prix riders, believe it or not, are much more like, we know we got to work at this, and we know we got to perfect it, and we know got to do it. And it's what allows us to get to that level of performance versus a person that says, oh, I do this, I'm good at this or whatever. And that they don't understand just that one moment of that train of thought affects your ability to improve, you know.
Now, Nick, you had a lot of opportunity too. You kind of grew up in a motorcycle household as well, right?
Yeah, very lucky. My dad was riding motorcycles before I was born. And when I was 12 years old, he took me down to the Suzuki shop, State Sports Suzuki in Salt Lake. That's where he lived, Dave, and bought me a TM 125. And the RM 125s were out, but I was so little I couldn't possibly fit. I barely fit on a TM 125. We went over to the across the street from Upland Terrace Elementary School. There's a gully, and he would take me over there and let me ride in the gully, and let me ride in the gully, and that's how it started. It changed my life now that I look back on it. So, Freddie, you and I, so many people out there are so lucky to have riding parents, and if you are a riding parent, I'll tell you, getting your kid involved in motorcycling, boy, girl, it is a great life, even if they don't do it professionally.
Yeah, I think I started on the little XT80s. Probably about the same age, 12, 13. Yeah, and we're about the same size. We're towering hulks of men. But yeah, I couldn't touch the ground on anything. Still can't. But was it always a desire to ride a motorcycle? Was that always there that you had to do it?
Yep, always there. Always just rode with my dad. Before I was 12, my dad would let me sit on the front of his GT 750. Remember those 3-cylinder 2-strokers? He had a Suzuki Water Buffalo, they called it. Sit on the front, and he'd let me do the throttle, and I couldn't shift, but he'd let me do the throttle, and so I was just totally into it. Wanted it so badly, and they held it over my head like so many kids. That's what you can do, parents. You can hold this over their heads and say, A's and B's, clean your room, or no riding, and that's why Freddie and I are such exemplary people.
Hey, my parents, I couldn't run my yard no matter how much I wanted. I didn't keep my grades up and stuff, so that was good.
And then, Nick, you went on to have a pretty impressive racing career as well. Like, you and Rich Oliver had some pretty exciting races back in the day.
Yeah, I don't remember him at all. Who is it? Yeah, Rich. Rich beat me pretty good every time. I might have beat him one time. I can't remember. Maybe at Willow. I can't remember. But yeah, he beat my butt. He went undefeated a couple of years. He pretty much owned 250 GP, and he beat my butt pretty good. But yeah, I finished second and third every year I ran, and just loved it. And I was doing it as a magazine journalist, and had Steve Bagansky as my tuner, and we just had the time of our lives. Just laugh out loud, fun, and boy, if we ever qualified in the front row, that's all anybody heard about. We'd walk around the pits, we're on the front row. We really enjoyed it, and it opened so many doors. I think Freddie, it's true. Probably when I applied to work for you in '97, I had some racing accolades, and that I think that got me in the door. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and also just that even though it wasn't going to be so much a racing school, but it's that standard. That I was looking for. Nick did that perfectly on there. He was the right person. So it worked out perfect. It was great. It was great 11 years.
I really believed in a world champion doing a school, because as I went through my riding career, I interviewed Freddie a couple times. Definitely that rubbed off on me. I got to hang out with Eddie Lawson. I was doing stories with him. His way rubbed off on me. Thomas Stevens helped me a lot. He was a national champion. Scott Gray helped me. Some of these people that came into my life at the right moments helped me. And I learned from people that were better than I was. And they gave me the right information at the right time. And so when Freddie announced that school, I was like, that's the way we should do it. It should, ideally, it's someone who has done a lot of stuff. And at that point, I'd won on 250s and super teams, which were unlimited, literally no rules, 4-strokes. So I had seen, and I got tired on the super teams bikes. We won championships because I did well on 250. So I truly did believe, which Freddie taught, is that if you ride correctly, every bike works. And that was a big part of his push. So I really believe when Freddie, 250 national world champion, a 500 world championship in the same year, and he said, I'm going to start a school, I was like, that's where I want to be. And I got him a resume and went in there and paid him to hire me. I paid him a lot of money to hire me. It was pretty good.
No, perfect. But it's true, Nick. It is when I announced I was going to teach trail braking, it has such a stigma. But So everybody said you can't teach the average rider, that's not the case, and more importantly, it's not so much about it not being the case. It's how you get the bike slowed down and turn, and you can make corrections in corners and things, even if you look at it as slowing and turning, using the brake as you're slowing and turning. So there was a lot of things, even 25 years ago now, that people had beliefs about. That's not so much the case, but there was a belief that to ride a bike properly, it was about skill level, about talent, instead of what it should be about, which is technique. Talent, you can go faster, more consistent, okay, different things. And that's even just a combination of where your sequencing and your technique, your inputs are so repetitive and so under control that all your thought is going toward management, because there are two separate things. And so, again, my belief, and I even understand better today than when I did 25 years ago, of course, that those two things work together. The better you get at being consistent with your technique, the better that is, then the better you can manage the riding, corrections, choices.
What has changed in the last few years, at least, is that so many people now truly believe in trail braking because what it has done for their riding. And if there's, obviously we'd like to get lessons across to people every time we talk. And I know Freddie is really the same as I am. I mean, we want to just teach this correctly. But if once you start the trail brake pressure into the corner, and that is just leaving the brake light on past the turn in, you're leaving the brake light on past the turn in, you're controlling your speed further down to the slowest part of the corner, which is down past the turn in always. You're controlling your steering geometry, so your bike actually steers a little bit better, a little bit lighter, and you're controlling your front tire contact patch, which you want at that point. Once you start to play with that, it changes your life. It changes your riding, and you become the person who writes into these websites when someone says, "Hey, Nick Ienatsch, you're an idiot for teaching trail braking. Dave Palazzolo, were you trying to kill people?" Now we have people writing us say, "You're 100% wrong. This is exactly what we should be doing." And it gets back to the question, Dave, that you started with is racing and street riding. And what we realized pretty quickly as we taught is that the bike has no idea whether it's on the racetrack, downhill turn 5 at Elkhart Lake, second gear, tight corner after a long straightaway, or a right-hander in a hayfield after a long straightaway. The bike has no idea whether it's at Elkhart Lake or on the street, running along the river, running down the canyon. The tires have no idea. So what Freddie did in '97 was said, boy, you know what? This worked to win world championships, and it will work to allow each rider to find not the speed of the world champion, that has nothing to do with it, but the consistency. So everybody there that has this idea that, racing and street riding are exactly are different riders. A road racer gets 0 points lying in the dirt. They get 0 points going slow. So if you go fast and crash your brains out, or go slow and not finish in the top, you get 0 points. You don't have a career left. And street riders, ruin your life by crashing a motorcycle on the street, ruin your health, ruin your bank account. So Freddie, this idea that we still push very hard really has changed lives. Fair to say?
Absolutely, Nick. I've told the story about I've been approached in airports years later after stopped going to school in Vegas, and then you guys went on from there. And the biggest rewarding is when someone comes up and they said, "I did this," which is not only the trail braking but the multitasking. And again, that comes from understanding the bike, how it works, and how to properly, and how the best way or the most efficient way to get the bike to because it's a rolling inertia gyro in one direction and changing it in the shortest amount of time and in the safest way possible, in the most consistent way. But I have someone that lived in Kansas, and they come up on a combine and turned in front of him. He said, "I rolled off throttle, got on the brakes, moved my body, and got the bike to pivot and rotate, and and I barely clipped the right bumper of the combine. Now, you don't know how those situations are going to turn out, but but that's an example of understanding how, or certainly what we taught, but also have the right choice. If you don't know, let's say, and this is where Nick was saying about, well, on the racetrack it's used for speed, but the whole point and the whole point I wanted to do it, even though maybe it wasn't going to be easy, and the reason is control, and to be able to make in that position a choice that gives you the best chance to get out of that in the least unscathed possible, and not be plastered on the side of that combine, right? I mean, it's just, those are the two choices that we have, right?
That's right. And Freddie, it gets to this saying we have at our school, and Mark Thompson, one of our former Marine Corps majors, brought to us, and I don't know where he heard it, but he said, if I'm wrong, I want to be wrong for the shortest time possible. And I just have to ask everybody out there that teaches riding, that wants to ride, that is going to be anybody out there involved in motorcycling. Why don't we try these things? Why would you stay tied to any particular habit? Why don't you try these things? Because here's the deal. This is not tennis, where Freddie Spencer says two-handed backhand and Troy Corser says one-handed backhand, and they argue about one, and the ball goes in the net or what doesn't. This is hurt yourself. This is 4,900 riders per year over the last 5 years. So 25,000 riders in the last 5 years have died on motorcycles in America. And so at some point, Freddie's passion, my passion, has to be realized that this all counts. So if you're going to ride a motorcycle, why don't you do it best practices? Why don't you do it the very, very best you can? And you all would sit there right now and say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So anybody who's tied to some of these past techniques, straight line braking, get off the brakes before you turn, not right. Ride like this in traffic instead of covering the brakes in traffic, not right. So the idea is that we're going to accelerate through the corner, not right. We're always playing with our speed to match our radius. So, and to be specific, we only accelerate when the corner opens. So if this is what you want to do, you want to ride a motorcycle, something that could hurt you and kill you, step up, listen to what we're saying, understand that the world champion says this works, this doesn't, this is right, that is wrong. And what we're going to do is we're going to stick with what works and what is right. And riders, wherever you are, if you have the desire, if you think, man, this is really something I want to do, you will be very, very good at it. And Freddie, I didn't tell you this, but it broke my heart. Guy called me. We were at a track at Buttonwillow. He called me, picked up my cell phone. He said, my name is Luis. I just got kicked out of the Motorcycle Safety Foundation class. They asked me to leave because I wasn't downshifting correctly. And I said, well, why didn't they teach you? And he said, well, they didn't. They asked me to leave. They gave me a piece of paper and told me to leave, that I shouldn't ride a motorcycle. And so I said, well, I've got an instructor in your area. So one of my instructors, YCRS guys, shows up in the parking lot, teaches him. He's riding, having the time of his life. And Freddie, that broke my heart. Have you ever told anybody shouldn't ride?
Right. No.
Yeah.
Of course not. I mean, how many times did you call people at the school when in Vegas? They were struggling 9 o'clock at night, and call them like, what can we do? And that was always the thing. Well, we had one of the students, Nick, and you might remember this, Nick, but I remember it so well. He, because we'd have people stand up at the beginning of class, introduce themselves, and he was one of those that never been on a bike till he was 37. I believe he was right about 37. He goes and he buys, they sell him a sport bike. He said he lived about 2 miles. He lived in St. Louis, about 2 miles from a dealership. And so it took him like 35 an hour to get home. I mean, he's scared. And he gets to the garage, parks it, and he didn't really want to tell his wife. And so he said, well, how was it? And I think, it was great. So it'd sit there for 2 weeks. And in those days, you typed in ride schools, or the school would pop up. And so he said, that's why I'm here. He said, and I went to do some training, and they, I didn't do a very good job or whatever. So he was there, and it's exactly like it was. By the second day, I told him, you're one of the fastest improving riders we've had. He's clean slate of paper, blank sheet of paper. And he basically learned, picked up, and he went on to be one of our best students. And I think he ended up even helping when they built the track there in St. Louis and got involved in the community and things. But that happens every day too. Not only what the sad story that Nick told you about, where that people just throw in the towel or give up, but also in both ways. Whether it's in that case the MSF local gave up on that student, or the fact the student is not getting the proper training. That's why the training part is so important. Not only, as we've been talking about, you hopefully make the right decisions when you need to and have the skills and technique to be able to do it. But also in this case, a rider that was really not sold the correct bike, and put in a position to fail,
Yeah.
But just didn't give up. And so everybody out there that maybe has had those experiences, as Nick was telling you, it's not, I've been doing this my whole life. The life it's given me is incredible, that I'm thankful for every single day. Right, Nick? I know you feel the same. And but don't give up, Don't let someone else determine the enjoyment you're going to have. And because if you come to the right place with the right people, they're going to support you and give you the tools and things to continue on this great sport that we share.
Yep. And if you'll think about for anybody who's coaching out there who wants to coach and coaching groups, the student has shown the desire, which Freddie said is the most important thing. He or she has shown the desire by showing up. They're paying the money, they're showing up. That is proven that they want to be there. So now it is up to us to figure out a way to teach them. And our instructors and myself, we understand that very clearly, that it's on us to help them. Say, we've never told a rider they shouldn't ride, even though, Freddie, you can remember we had some people that were so new and so out of their element, but we stuck with it and did that job. So I believe it's up to us to work with them and riders, the coaches that do these the 2-day schools. It's okay to tell a student at the end, say, listen, you don't quite have it yet. I don't feel comfortable putting you through, but I would like you to come back and offer them a 50% off or a free day or two to get them past that little bit. And that's what we have to do because they've shown the desire.
Absolutely.
And and the other thing that's illegal at my school is none of my instructors can tell a student you need 10,000 hours to get proficient. That has been completely illegalized at our school, because if some student comes in and sits down and then we say, hey, you got to do this for 10,000 hours to get good, which we don't believe, right? We don't believe. Anybody who's out there who's thinking about it, we believe if you are told the right thing and you practice the right thing, the improvement is so phenomenally fast. It's unbelievable how good people get if they're practicing the right thing, because practice makes permanent. So we got to get the right thing to them. And Dave, you taught new rider schools and you don't do it anymore. You weren't happy with it. I mean, I don't want to throw stones at people. I want to say, let's shift the whole riding industry. Let's get things going.
Well, and I get criticized sometimes because I think people think I'm hard on basic rider courses. Basic rider courses are critical. They're important. These guys are out there doing the Lord's work. But there are places where I really think these basic rider courses need to be improved. I was thinking the other day that, okay, so why have these basic rider courses been saying it's okay to accelerate in a corner, but it's not okay to brake in a corner? Well, and they'll say, well, it's because the front brake can be done abruptly, right? Even a super powerful motorcycle, when you roll on the throttle, the throttle is going to be relatively gentle. Well, what's going to be changing in our sport where now the torque being applied to the rear tire may be just as abrupt as the front brake? Electric motorcycles are going to we might be on a collision course with basic rider courses if we don't start thinking about some of these more holistic approaches to how we're teaching riders.
The difficult part that we want to move beyond is how to use the brake smoothly, understanding the input, and what level of each of those points of input, 1 point, 2 points, 3 point, 4 points, the effect it has. The first effect is transfer weight forward. The second effect, once we get to a certain point, is we load, weight forward, load that front suspension, compress it, solid, load the tire, solid. Now that between the tire and our hands, which is what we feel with, is contacted, right? Now we can maximize our front brake. And I was saying the other day when I was visiting with Nick and them in Vegas, someone was asking about, or asked the question to the student, do all of you have the sequence of what you do in every corner? Well, not sure. Don't think so. Okay, well, that's the problem. How do you expect then to be able to, in that moment that you need to make the decision, how can you make it safely, consistently, same way every time, and not use up time and distance? Okay, so I said I use myself example. I have 3 steps. Move the body, lower body's in position, next is rolling off on the brakes, clutch, downshifted, all in my maximum braking zone. Obviously the first step, loading the front tire, maximum braking zone. And then the next step is feeding off the brakes, controlling my radius, controlling the direction, rotating the bike. So I'm ready for the next step. Through a blind corner, there's CanyonChasers. You ride through a lot of canyons, right? So you go through a lot of blind corners. Well, I have 3 choices now. I'm prepared for anything that happens next, because the first part is that sequence of events. Now, this all sounds complicated, doesn't it? It's really not. When you learn it, you understand how the bike works and you train yourself, and we all have this capacity to do it, is to be able to feel those things, remember it, have that sequence of events. Now, let's go back to what you said, though. Well, I don't teach it because you can be abrupt with the brakes, right? That is a cop-out. You know, it just is. I mean, it's like if you understand the benefits, and I used to say this in racing terms, you know, especially in the old 2-stroke days. Now with electronics, you can certainly have the adjustments to be able to mask a rider's weaknesses. If they're abrupt on the throttle and everything, you can do that. In the older days, throttle controls everything. And so, but I always used to say everything's a compromise, you know, and, you know, I think that's where you have to, we can move beyond, you know, the old belief of, well, I'm not going to teach someone how to use the brakes in a corner because these 2 things can happen. Right? Right, Nick? I mean, it's like, that's just unacceptable in that respect, you know?
Yeah, almost every answer that we give as coaches begins with, it depends, right? It depends. For instance, you couldn't accelerate to a corner when the corner is less than 90 degrees. You turn in and accelerate because the corner is opening. But it gets back to the basic idea. We accelerate, we can see the exit and take away lean angle, because an accelerating motorcycle lengthens the steering geometry and wants to run straight. So it becomes very straightforward. And right now, there's somebody listening to this thinking we're crazy, that we can't teach new riders that. And it's only because the current programs out there that we've seen and studied don't have the right order. They're not in the right order. And I'm not here to rewrite their curriculum. I would rewrite their curriculum, and I would love to, but they're not asking me. So we're not here to rewrite their curriculum. But so many of those type of rider coaches believe we can't teach this to new riders because they don't start the process correctly. They don't start the process with the priorities that Freddie mentions and that we work on so hard. And that's provable. And it's so funny because I swore years ago to never discuss riding technique without a motorcycle in a parking lot or a road or a track. I just, because everything works in theory, right, Freddie? Everything in theory works. Do all your braking in a straight line. Oh, that's such a good idea. Get all your braking done before you steer. Oh, fantastic. And you would be safe forever. But now all of a sudden you're on a sport tour with your sweetie on the back. It's raining. You're into a corner you've never seen before and it tightens. And all of a sudden you've let go of the brakes that tip in and you're across the center line. And if there's a tuck there, you die. So that's the problem, is the theory that I promised myself I would never discuss without a motorcycle. It can sound just exactly right. And if I have a motorcycle there, anybody who we're discussing this with will feel the control of brake pressure on past tip in. They'll feel the cut reaction time of covering the brakes. They'll feel this. And I'm a guy that just believes that we will try to make this best practices. That we'll say, you know what? This works for the world champions to go really, really fast and not fall down. This should work for my students to get to breakfast on Sunday morning at any speed they want and not fall down. And that's my belief. And I'm naive enough, Freddie, to still be pushing it.
No, I think, the thing is, Nick, I think, one of the things, and you're correct. I mean, it's easy, and again, it's based on, speed. You have someone listening right now and they go, well, I don't really go fast enough. I don't need to use the brakes when I get to a corner. Because to me on the street, I want to use the least amount of lane angle. You see someone riding on the road and, they're going in and probably the majority of them, just saying, not being critical, but majority of them, they go in a corner and they might vary in a corner. They go through 5-6 feet. And the only way if they misjudge your speed is they have to apply more lane angle. Now, see, because I'm such a cautious rider in general, I don't like taking risk at all. So I get in that corner and I have to apply more lane angle. My concern is always, well, what if a car came through and drug some rocks on the road? My belief with this, I'm very passionate about it, as you can tell. From the very beginning, it's always been is if I can make an adjustment in the area that I have to make the adjustment, isn't that better to have that technique than not? I'm just, just from the standpoint of, I know that we can all go in a corner in different ways on a motorcycle. No one understands that better than me. I've done it all different ways, but I also believe in having the most control and the most options. And in our case, on a motorcycle, is if I can get away with running less lane angle, and this is where racing taught me this, bike development taught me this, understanding tire technology taught me this, is that if I can have better control and better grip, I have better options if I need to make corrections. Right? I mean, so you can tell me all day long, and I will say, good luck with that. And I'm happy, and you're right that we can go through corners in all different ways and enjoy that. But I'm just saying, I think that if we look at the best way to have the best control at any given moment, the better prepared we are, as Nick showed you, just having your fingers right, be able to make adjustments, understanding how to load the tires. And that's what we want everybody, I'm saying everybody out there is just, yes, there are different choices, but what gives us the best control, and the best options?
The number one place we're dying on a motorcycle is running wide in corners. That's study done. Thompson did a big study with the Marine Corps. Running wide in corners. And riders, that number one fatal spot, running wide in corners or curves, corners, usually right turns, is directly tied to the mistakes taught new riders. If you're taught to straight line brake, get off the brakes before you turn in, you cannot control your bike. And that's the word Freddie uses, control your bike into the corner. If you're taught to accelerate the bike in the corner, as you accelerate a motorcycle or any vehicle, airplane, car, boat, the radius opens. And in this case, the radius opens at the same lean angle. So you're at the same lean angle, but you're accelerating, your radius opens. So these two, that fatal point can be tied directly to new riders or riders believing they get all the braking done before they steer and then accelerate through the corner, directly tied. So at some point, when Freddie says, hey, do it the way you want, but good luck. The problem is, this is my whole life. I met my wife at a racetrack. All my friends are road racers. A road racer hired me back in '97. This is my whole life. So I'm pissed off. I'm pissed off about what's being taught. And I'm going to do my very, very best to change it because it hurts me.
Absolutely. And Nick, listen, anybody who says about, well, because you said it, you just said it. Most crashes, of course, they happen in corners. It's where people get hurt. Hey, guess what? Street, racetrack, exactly the same.
Is it? Yeah.
It's well, of course, it's exactly the same. It's our ability to be able to make those corrections. And again, I use the word not depending on lane angle because most grip here, least amount of grip here. And everything in between is a variable. And that variable in between is based on, guess what? Main two things. How much brake pressure we use, how much aggression we use to try to turn it, the radius, and power. Everything in here is affected by that, And so, understanding how to do it. And you said it yourself, about putting the bike in a position to where we're asking it to do something that it really wasn't designed to do in that moment. Right? I mean, what Nick was saying about, you get in the corner and now your only approach is on the brakes, off the brakes. Now you're asking yourself to judge the distance. And Nick knows I used to use in the classroom as an example is coming up to every stop sign, getting on the brakes, off the brakes, 20 feet, 30 feet, 15 feet before. How can you judge that? Can't. Right? So
you
that's
run wide.
why,
You run wide.
of course, or add more lean angle to compensate for it. And now you're getting on the throttle, taking weight off the front. You got a more lean angle. The front of the bike is still wanting to turn. Now you're driving it with the rear wheel. And then you wonder, why on the road, the guy crashes, going through a corner, under throttle, on an exit, adding lean angle, and, tire sucks.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe. But wait a minute, the bike is actually maybe in a position to where, you really taking the weight off the front, driving the rear. That probably had something to do with it,
The corner better be opening up if that's your style. You said we've been discussing this for 25 years. That's funny. My friend Ken Hill and I were at a track day and we were talking about it. We said, this is not getting better. Track days are not getting safer. Yet we have all the nannies, traction control, wheelie control, yaw control, spin control, ABS, power modes. We got all these things, but we just aren't, the onboard engineer is not doing the right job. And so there was just a track day that I heard about, had 3 life flights. It had 3 helicopters flying out of it. People say I quit going to track days because there's a red flag almost every session. I lose my sessions. I'm wasting my money. So even where we think that people are riding well and are learning, are still not. They're still not got these things figured out. And I'm telling you, there are answers out there that are life changing for you all that are doing track days, much less street riding. They're just life changing, where it changes everything you're doing all of a sudden. And Mark Thompson, this Marine Corps major, he said it best. He goes, before I met you guys, every corner was kind of a crapshoot, track or street. Every corner was kind of like, man, I hope this all comes together. Now
Open
it's just, yeah, that's right. Open pray. Now he says, now it's complete control. Every corner is complete control on roads I've never seen before. And that's, so I'm not pitching my school. I'm saying there's a world out there waiting for you that will change your life and make you that rider that you want to become. And Freddie, that was truly your push in '97. You held nothing back. You said, this is how I did it. You gave everybody keys to the kingdom. And that's why your school killed it. And now YCRS is killing it, because we say, this is how it works.
I want to say something about what you said about track days. I haven't been to one. I don't, but this is what I imagine is electronics. And I said this, I rode Mick Doohan and I rode the very first of the RCVs. We introduced them in '01 at Motif. And the coolest part was, because I love, obviously, Nick, we all love two strokes, and I grew up racing, Grand Prix bikes on two strokes. But to hear that thing in the garage fired up was pretty good. It was pretty amazing.
It was pretty good.
Yeah, it was pretty good. So rode out on the track right away, and the whole paddock was still there because it was at the end of practice on Friday, because no one had seen the bike front. And so we went out and there's a video, it's on YouTube, I think, of where I'm leading Mick coming on the fresh straightaway, and the rear bike breaks traction and corrects itself. The electronics, the very first ones, were reactive, not proactive. It reacted to it. And I remember I wouldn't really accelerate that hard anyway, so I didn't really get out of the throttle, so it actually kicked in and worked. So anyway, I stopped, and I remember the journalists were asking, we're up to electronics and things. And what I said right away was, I said, well, racing, we're taught, and granted, this is, a long time ago now, and we hadn't experienced electronics yet. But I said, we teach ourselves, we have to learn throttle control, brake control, clutch control. And I said, this is going to be great for the average rider, electronics, because it will mask so many issues. The problem with that is now I can only imagine, that's track days. They get away with so much until they can't. And now the speeds are so much higher because the bikes are allowing them to go faster because it doesn't give that feedback of danger, 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 because they're so good, which is great. And they're so forgiving in so many ways, but they've never learned how a bike works. So now they're crashing at a lot higher speeds, getting hurt, maybe. I'm not saying, but I couldn't imagine what it would be like. And so just say it out there that no matter what, the bike gives you, and it's great. It's like I always say about setup, buying parts, getting suspension, getting all these things. Learn how the bike works first, and then utilize the things that make the bike easier to ride, and your riding experience will be even greater, right? Absolutely. But don't depend on it because it is great until it's not. And then you go, what happened? And that's just my opinion.
Yeah, the crashes are more violent because it's not like an old day, like an SV650, they just ran out of whatever and they low slide into the dirt. Now they're so far beyond where a normal rider could get to that it's like these violent high sides and these, and it's sad, right? Like
it should be. I'll give you an example. The one thing I'm doing the chairmanship on or I'm involved with the MotoGP panel, so I don't get to ride that often much anymore over the last 5 years. But I have done a couple of product launches on the Fireblade, and I've ridden 7-8 days each time, which was great. And the modern bikes with electronics, it allows someone, like I said, I'm 61 now. This was a couple of years ago, and I was riding with Bautista and Leon. And so I could hang with them a little bit because the bike helped me. I mean, that's just the truth. The bike allowed me to be able to, not weaknesses, but just a little bit easier. Beautiful, right? I thought that was great. It was great. Now, what if, though, I didn't have the techniques and understanding of the bike? I could have got myself in trouble a lot quicker. Just the truth, because I understand, and that's why it's so important. Even if you don't realize that you need, I promise you do, that it will help you to be able to avoid some of those things, because the bikes are so forgiving today. Again, like I said, they will suck riders in, put them in positions they're not ready for.
Yeah, and I'm big on specifics because people tune into these to certainly look at our pretty faces. I know that's a big thing of it, but to hear these things, and for those of us that do track days on big fast bikes, I have a big fast motorcycle. If you will get this very clearly in your mind, more speed, more brakes. The faster you go, the earlier you must brake. And that means earlier brake pressure, a little more brake pressure, use them a little further down in the corner, because the corner will not magically open for us. It stays the same for us. So as we go faster toward the corner, we have to brake earlier than the lap before as we went slower or on a slower bike. And if you'll get that in your brain, and Freddie, what really, we have 5 reasons, we have 7 reasons we crash at the motorcycle, at the school. And I believe we're getting to almost the priority now is rushing corner entry, because we can't be saved at corner entry by electronics. We have to do that ourselves. So when we save corner entry riders, you are not on the curb at the apex. You are somewhere wide of the curb at the apex. And that should be a red light alarm bell going off in your mind saying you're going to have a problem pretty soon, because you have to hold lean angle off the corner because you don't have to point it yet. So Freddie, this idea, and I think that it was, I know that I never talked to you about it, but it must have been a huge part of transferring from the 250 to the 500, is that the 500 has to brake earlier. And I think this is getting these people in trouble. They buy these fast motorcycles and they think I'm going to brake later and later.
Right. Exactly. And because of the fact of braking earlier, smoother, the higher speed, the more the grip is affected by the friction and the load and the speed that you're trying to compensate for. The tire, the higher corner speed you have, the more lane angle you have, the more the grip is affected by that friction and speed. So every input has to be smoother, more delicate, and the transition to throttle is the same. You said the violent high side, is, traction control is going to save me, and so they get, possibly, more than likely, they have been run a certain speed. Now they're 1 or 2 miles an hour, and that's all it takes. 1 or 2 mile an hour more, the same application of throttle. Now it's over the grip level.
And way over the grip level, because it's overwhelmed the traction control.
It has. It's overwhelmed the traction control, and the traction control can't react fast enough to be able to compensate for that. And so, one is so you understand the relationship with the bike. But that, to where when you get in a situation, you don't overwhelm the traction control. You don't not so dependent on it that you become, lazy in many respects on how you apply the throttle.
Yeah, if you think about it, riders out there, you are doing something that was beyond the imagination of the engineer. The engineers who designed that machine never imagined that you would miss the apex, start to accelerate, and add lean angle, and it overwhelms it. It overwhelms it. So this idea behind earlier brakes, not rushing corner entries, is becoming a bigger part of our school because we have such fast motorcycles out there, and that whole rush into corner entry, you can't get the bike pointed at the apex. That's really what we're pushing, and you have to start to coach yourselves, riders, because the crashes can be so gigantic. And it's funny, Freddie, that if anybody's looking at us saying, hey, there's these two old guys talking about this stuff. Everybody, we wanted the high level. We went very, very fast, and we still go fast, right? Freddie, you jump on these bikes, dude, and you're rolling. And so we are proving it every moment, and that's a big thing. That's a big thing.
Yeah, and the thing is, Nick, it's the part that like I said, is if it's not about talent, or it's not about age, or it's not about the speed you go. It's about, this is how a bike works, and these are the dynamics that you're working against as you put this bike in the correct position, and that doesn't change. It just doesn't change. And it just doesn't. And that is the part, again, of control. And that's why when I was racing and started the school, I didn't come out to students and say, well, you can't learn this because, you don't have the same talent. No, it's a technique. It's someone out there that might be younger that looks at this and goes, yeah, but, I'm riding a modern bike. Okay. It's not, it's irrelevant. It's about, this is how the bike works. And it's one of the things that is great about what we do, and what we have so much of an impact on how the motorcycle reacts or doesn't react. I've told the story a few times. I've had a couple of crashes on corner entrance at a Grand Prix, and it threw me off. The track was drying, and anyway, I hit a wet spot. It threw me off left side. And then the bike went through the corner perfectly. I was chasing it. There's a picture of me chasing this bike. I was trying to catch it. We got bonus money for pole position at the time. No, but anyway, I think the other thing, Nick, that you said so well about, the mid corner, the engineers, is it's mechanical. And so the application of throttle, certainly the traction control kicks in, but the application of throttle, how you get on the brakes, transferring that weight, loading the tire, making the direction change, and then being able to make adjustments, is all controlled by us, and so the better we understand that, the better we do it. That is the consistency through all the years, through all different motorcycles, the evolution of the modern bikes, and certainly with electronics.
One of the biggest track racing organizations in the country said they were cycling through 60% of their members every 2 years. So every 2 years, 6 out of 10 racers riding with them quit. And why do they quit? Well, you crash yourselves out where you're physically hurt, or you crash yourself to the point where you can't spend the money, or you go to races or track days, and there's so many red flags that you get half the riding you should, and you do something else. So there's a lot of push to this idea of getting things safer. And there's 2 ways to get safer. One is to slow down and ride around at 30%, and that's not our personality. You'll lose interest. You'll just have your bike parked in the garage. The other way is to get truly after these things. And anybody who's had a crash, and Freddie, we are often the last choice for someone who's had a crash. You're like, okay, I keep falling down. When I try to go faster, I fall down. I'm going to go to the school and see what happens. I encourage you, if you've had a crash, to get after this stuff. Study the things that Dave's putting out, certainly that Freddie and I are doing, study this stuff, and you'll start to see some very clear problems that you're having, and you'll start to see it. It's explainable. There are reasons things go right and wrong. And I'm telling you, it's not easy. It's one of the toughest things that we'll ever do in our lives, and that's why it's so enthralling. I just cannot wait to ride again. It's so fun, but it is very straightforward. And that's my encouragement to anybody who's thinking about, I'm going to back away from it.
Yeah, when I first discovered it, it was just a profound change. You just don't run wide in corners anymore. And hey, now one of your instructors, he came up to me and he's like, it sounds silly, but it's like discovering the right religion. You're like, oh, everything now feels good. Everything now is a peaceful. There's no drama. Like the excitement comes from the precision and like that's so much better than this, like always on I hope I make it. I hope I set my entrance speed correctly. I hope I'm leaning far enough. I hope there's enough grip. Now it's this, oh, I know what's going on. And there's just so much joy in that.
Right. Well, I was just going to say, and you said it, is not afraid. Because that comfort level that you're talking about is because the fear where you're almost afraid of being wrong. You're afraid of change. You're afraid of because you really maybe don't know what to do. And so you're riding, and it's one of the reasons why that they cycle through so many is you get out there, they scare themselves, or they don't really, and they want to do it and they want to get better at it, but the joy never really comes. And the joy never really comes because they're not in control, and every corner is an open prey, or, and they hit a brick wall. That's the other thing that happens. The people, especially do track days, is they improve, then they either crash a lot or get hurt, or they hit a brick wall. Three things in a corner: corner entrance, mid corner is everything, because it sets up the exit, which is if you want to gain time on a racetrack, on a track day, and get better and beat 90% of the people you race against at that track day, is get better corner exit. Well, that can only happen if you do the first two things correctly, which is get in at the best speed, right? But also that transition of application lane angle, direction change. Well, that has to happen in a certain amount of time. The faster you go, the less time you have. So if you go in, on the brakes, off the brakes, lean in, go to the throttle, I think you're kind of limited on how quickly the brake's going to change direction. Because then what happens, as Nick told you, you're going to drift away from the apex, and now you're going to have more lean angle on the exit, and that's going to limit your ability to accelerate. Because now you've narrowed the track up, in this case, as we're talking about, right? At track days or racing conditions. So, I mean, it's if for no other all the reasons we've talked about, but if you want to do track days, you want to be consistent, take the least amount of risk, and have that control, then you got to improve in these particular areas, which is a good training place, a good school. That's what they teach you, not just hope to lean in it and go to the throttle. So, and again, bring it back to the street. Bring back the street and misjudge that first part. The faster you're going, the less time you have. Everything is time and distance. So,
and even as a cruiser rider, you're going into a corner, whatever the example you use, Nick, with your girlfriend or your sweetie or significant other on the back, you think, well, I don't ride at the limit. I don't like to go fast. I don't enjoy the speed thing. But you end up in a corner that tightens back up, or there's water running across the road, right? Now you're at the limit, and like, how about we learn the skills that you don't end up in those situations?
Right. So that's why, exactly. But that's why going back to they work hand in hand, the fear, and then making the right decision. Because that rider that you just described that goes in there with his girlfriend on the back is responsible for himself, her first, because she's on the back with you. If their approach has always been, well, I don't go fast, I don't race, I don't feel comfortable using the brakes. What are you going to do when you get to that water? What are you going to do if there's gravel, car coming the other direction, if you're right in corn? I mean, what are you going to do?
Hope.
Yeah, but I mean, so how in the world could you ever feel confident and not a little bit afraid, right? And just hope it's not your time, right? How can you ever not be a little bit scared? And that panic in that moment, we're all the same. This has fear knows no talent mode. It just narrows up your thoughts. It narrows up your reactions. It slows down everything you do and your reaction. It's that's all. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's
Yeah, I don't think being scared is fun. I don't think riding in fear is a fun experience. And I ride to have fun,
yes. I mean, that was the whole point. It's why I, when Nick said about, me when I started the school, that was the thing I felt most about. Everything that I utilized or put in that first program, trailbreaking, we can use moving our body, teaching what I had learned over my 29 years on how bike works, and how we interact with it. So it was all geared toward, as much as anything, the joy that I get from riding, the joy that I remember when I closed my eyes before every Grand Prix. I closed my eyes, say a little word about, let's keep everybody safe. Let's have a great day. But I would think about my yard. When I rode my yard, I could feel the air change between the front and the back. The trees were thicker in the back than the front. That's how aware I was about just the sensation of riding. That's incredible. It gave me everything,
Well, that just gave me goosebumps. That's pretty touching. That's incredible. Yeah, because I think we've all experienced that.
Yeah, of course. That's what we share, right? That's the great thing that we share through motorcycling. That's why I'm sitting there talking about this. I mean, we actually care. It's a lot. There's a lot of people out there that care. It's not about that, but it's just that we understand this and want to help others to have the best opportunity to understand.
Yeah, and right now, if we look up in our local Craigslist, you'll see a bike for sale. It's 6 years old. It's got 2,300 miles on it. It's for sale with the jacket, the helmet, oil filters, and extra oil. And that rider says, I don't have time to ride, but they've never experienced the joy that we three have experienced, because they are literally doing something wrong on the bike at the wrong moment. They're not riding the bike the way it was designed to be ridden by people like Freddie. And so that joy part is huge. And Freddie, Ryan Burke, and everybody's listening. Ryan Burke is a 6-time MRA #1 plate holder, just dominant in Colorado. He came to the school about 7 or 8 years ago, and then he started winning championships. He told Freddie at the school, he said, Freddie, I was afraid to go to YCRS because I didn't want to ruin the joy I have in motorcycling. I didn't want it to make it all super processive and logical and boring and banal. And he said it became more fun from learning how to do it correctly. He gained joy, and then he said, and winning never gets old. And that was really a couple specifics. We talk about direction change and direction change and lean angle are separate issues. And I wanted to talk about direction change really quickly, because what is getting us hurt on back roads, in intersections, in off ramps, and on the track is failure to get direction. So I will say, I'll start this with an idea that corner entry, the time that you go to the brakes, downshift, eyes, body position, tip in, all that corner entry is just to get the bike ready for the exit. When Freddie said you want to drop your lap time to get better at exits. And so some of you might have thought, oh, I need to accelerate early, but with the caveat is that you have direction. So I wanted everybody to get that idea that corner entries get the bike ready to exit. And if you miss your apex, the inside edge of the curbing, if you can't get there, you're rushing. You need to fix that somehow. Go to the brakes earlier, build more pressure, use them further, get the bike to here, because now you are pointed and have direction. And I want to just throw it to Freddie, was saying that if you really understand this concept of radius equals miles per hour at the same lean angle, whatever lean angle you're comfortable with, whatever, gravel, rain, whatever lean angle you choose, how you affect your speed will affect your cornering radius. So if you're wide of the apex on the racetrack, and certainly if you're wide of where you want the bike to be on the street, your mile an hour needs to be controlled better coming in at your lean angle. Radius is mile an hour. So Freddie, direction versus lean angle to you was huge, is huge, and we want to make it bigger in people's minds.
Yes. Well, the thing is, Nick, what you said there, if you talking about getting the bike in position, that's going to take a certain amount of time. If you misjudge that, it's going to take longer. You're going to be to get the bike in the right position, which does what? Affects your ability to be able to get on the throttle to accelerate in the safest possible way, right? So if you can maintain that brake pressure, and this is the dynamics of understanding how the bike works, is that as you're applying lean angle and you use brake pressure, there's a certain point to where the brakes are making the bike rotate better than anything else, because it's slowing down the front wheel, and as the front wheel turns that direction, it basically pulls the bike inward. Is the sensation you have. I used to use the saying about, like, if someone had a rod and reel and they hooked you and then they started reeling you in, that's the basic feeling that you get. But imagine a corner, you can see on the screen here, and this is the part I want to change direction. If I just use the lead angle or the natural slowing the bike at that same speed, it's going to take this long. That would be the difference. If a rider and I were on the same line at that same point, that when Nick puts up and talks about the distance between at the apex, the closest point, he's going to be out here, I'm going to be here. And more than likely, if we're moving this way, he's going to have the bike pointed this way. Mine's going to be turned this way, and it's going to be closer. So who can now pick up the throttle and take away the lean angle? Me. And I can get on the throttle sooner, safer, and have more room then on the exit. The track's wider, that I can pick up an exit to. And it's consistent, right? So if we look at it just from a practical way of controlling what happens in that part of the corner, it makes a difference, getting the bike in the right position to now accelerate. Again, if we transfer that on the street, it's the difference between in that corner, lean angle, I have less lean angle, I can pick the bike up and make adjustments.
Because on the street, we want to be careful about that apex, right? We don't want our head in the oncoming lane.
Of course. Exactly. Of course. You don't want to, in a right-hand corner, you want to be, in my opinion, you want to be as far away, especially a corner you can't see through, away from that center line. And you want to have options. And you want to have the right trajectory. It's like one little thing of, one thing about putting the bike in the right position, Nick, and I would do this in the school, is I would talk about, I can change direction in the area that I can see in a blind corner. That means I can get the bike slowed properly and start to turning the trajectory going the direction I want. Why is that important? Most riders that don't know how to use the brakes properly in a corner they can't see through fade in. If they have the correct speed, okay, they'll be fine. But imagine if they don't, and this is the center line, and this is the trajectory. My trajectory would be this way, which would be parallel away from that center line to be able to make corrections. They're going toward it. Now they misjudge your speed. That's why they go across the center line. It's not only that they can't control the bike's speed, they're out of control or being able to do it, but they've also put themselves in a position to where they make it much more difficult. That's, thinking about those things and those dynamics is another reason why that for us, understanding what we need to do on the bike at the right time becomes clearer, right?
Yeah, for all three of us on this screen, and a missed apex is a disaster. When we miss apexes on the racetrack, and I'll be even more clear, when our corner entry speed or line hurts our exit, that's how you start to think about it. For all you that want to do track days and are doing track days and wants to make it really simple, as soon as our corner entry speed, line, etc. hurts our exit, we can't get the bike driven off the corner. We have to hold lean angle after the apex. We know that's a problem. So now all of a sudden you start to gauge your laps in a whole different way. Instead of just looking at lap time or who you passed, you start to look at apexes. And for street riders, and I street ride all the time. Freddie, you street ride with Alessandro on the back, right? Dave street rides probably more than all of us. But as soon as you are unhappy with your line, as soon as you're offline, especially if you have to hold lean angle, as the corner opens up and you're still holding lean angle, get direction, those are the alarm bells that set off what we're doing here. And if you really understand what Freddie's going to do for the rest of his life is he's going to use his brakes to the slowest part of the turn, which is never near the tip end, never near the turn end. So for all of us that are playing with trail braking, generally speaking, when people come to our school and they've started a trail brake and they get a feel for it, they are literally not trail braking quite far enough. Trail brake a little bit longer to control the speed, the front tire, etc. And remember, rider, if you think to yourself, well, I'm not going to use my brakes in the corner because I'll fall down, the tire will take a tremendous load, but won't take an abrupt load. So if you're snatching at the brake lever, or if you're turning the bike very quickly, that's when you fall down. If you're steering your bike in a linear fashion, braking in a linear fashion, the tire has amazing load. And that's, have that confidence that it'll take load without the abruptness.
I think a lot of people miss the point that a tire is effectively a spring with no damping, right? If you were to take a spring and hit it, it's going to just spring and bounce, right? But if we load a spring and release that load, the spring is now under control. A tire, really, we get kind of caught up in like dynamic friction and static friction and stuff like that. But a tire is a spring.
Right. The sidewall. Exactly right. The biggest change over the years has been from radials. Then in the 80s, it's one of the adjustments from racing standpoint that we had to get used to, and even in setup and even in the feedback was that. But you're exactly right on it, is that it's the last bit of your suspension, and how you unload it, how you load it and unload it, of course, makes a difference, affects the contact patch. So that's a very good point on that.
Yeah, I want to congratulate people that are listening to this, and because this is exactly what successful people do. They really stew in stuff, and I'm really glad you're listening to this and getting these ideas going. And Dave, I want to also congratulate you, because you did push to learn things yourself and pass them on, and you continue to evolve as a rider and as a person who's teaching riders through your videos, and Dave, a lot of people are still stuck in what they learned 20 years ago, and you keep tweaking it. And has it made your life better as a rider?
Oh, yeah. Well, to quote our Marine Corps friend, I want to be wrong for the least amount of time as possible. And I've been wrong about a lot of things, and I will continue to be wrong about things. But I think the difference is to always be hungry. I don't like being wrong. We're always looking uphill, right? We always want to be better, I hope, right? And so, if I get entrenched in tradition, when I was in the military, they made you take these tests, like personality tests. And mine came through as a criticism. It said, is unimpressed with tradition, because I didn't really like these. We do this because this is how we've always done it. And I think that's kind of carried through. I am unimpressed with tradition. I don't care about historic use or historic whatever. What do we know now? We have all these, bike analytics and data acquisition and computer modeling. We know more now. We do.
Of course. Absolutely. And the thing is, it confirms, it's one of the things when we first got, that's data acquisition on the American Honda team, the Sub Bike team here is 20 years ago. And a lot of riders were under the impression that in mid-corner of the bike, the tire was overloaded. And that's why I was tucking, because it was losing grip. The reality was especially if they weren't utilizing the brakes very well, so that they used the brakes to continue the load on the front to the point to where the tire needed the maximum grip. And then once you make that transition to brake and throttle, from brake to throttle, the front tire had the best chance to have the most grip. And then in turn, you had less front end tucks, right? They really believe it. Well, with data acquisition, we can show it. For example, for listeners out there, and when they went to 100 extended forks, 125 millimeters travel, they could be that on the brakes on the bottom of the load, and then release the brakes and get to maximum lane angle as quickly as possible. It would unload to 90 before it ever even got to maximum lane angle. Before the rider could get it to its side as quick as a professional rider could, it would be absolutely pretty much unloaded. So, that putting that tire, if we think about it in that way, putting that tire in that condition, the data, the modern technology just confirmed some of the things that people thought, and then maybe that why it worked to do it this way, are what help to put the bike in the best position, give yourself the most control. So I love it. That's why I love modern technology and things. And there's certain characteristics that just, no matter electronics, no matter what, work the same. Load, grip, application, abruptness, affecting what hasn't changed, which is our contact patch. Right.
And I hope readers, the listeners are seeing that there are explainable data-backed reasons that we do these things. So the rider that gets on the brakes, off the brakes and steers, unloads and has to reload under cornering load. And Freddie, myself, Dave, we're asking you to skip that unload and reload by trail braking. Keep that front brake load on and give away brake pressure load as you add lean angle load, and that's called trail braking. You're doing it in your car, et cetera. But Freddie, 20 years ago, recognized data is backing up what he was doing when he was working with these Honda racers. They were falling down, riders, because they come in and they jump off the brake so quickly, the front tire, undamped suspension, as Dave would unload, go smaller contact patch, and they'd fall down. So if you had a crash at corner entry, and you're like, wow, how did I fall down? It's always because you jumped off the brake so quickly and you unloaded. You didn't damp the rebound of that tire by letting go of the brakes over a longer period of time, slower. And what I hope you're hearing is a beautiful part of what I hope you're hearing is how explainable this is and how reasonable and how data backed it is.
And it's so engaging that here we are, we're chatting about it for an hour, right? Like we're having so much fun discussing these things, like the nuance of these things. It's amazing.
Yes, it is. And I for me, that's always been the part I love most about riding is and once I learned how to ride, and granted, once I realized all the things that I could impact, that's where, again, and that's where we are trying to, to really get that message across, that the sensation that you feel when you go out and ride, that joy of the freedom of just, and not worrying about what you're doing or why you're doing it, is great until you need to make another choice. But I promise you that once you understand truly how to control the bike and you work with it, the joy will be even greater. Trust me, that comfort level, as you said, one of the things, Dave, right, that you got that moment where it's like this, my comfort level increased, and it's like it opened up this whole new area of the sensation and joy of riding. Because the fear and the lack of that part that was always there, that was limiting, kind of gets pushed aside. And that's probably the hardest part for someone that's just listening to really comprehend, maybe, but that will come. Open up yourself to a whole nother level of experience is what it is, and that's the part that has kept me interested in riding. I can get on a bike today where there's classic bikes, or I ride modern bikes, Fire Blades, and I love it. And that's the other thing for all you older riders of all generations out there is you never understand, you never stop learning. It's how we keep ourselves sharp and on top of things. And shoot, I'm ready to go today. Yeah.
Yeah, I love seeing like your eyes just start to twinkle when you start talking about, that bike was so much fun. And I got to ride for 13 days. It was amazing.
I could ride all day, ride all day. Yeah.
There is a strong message for anybody of any age. And it's the spirit of youth. It's the spirit of wanting to do something. Some of you sitting there are wanting to ride a motorcycle forever and have, for different reasons, family, money, whatever else, and you're in a position to do it. I don't believe it's time in the sport. I believe it's proper technique in the sport. So I would encourage anybody who has this desire. We have people of all ages show up, of all experience levels, but they have that desire. So I encourage that. And the second thing is, excuse me, if I could speak to all the coaches and all the fast riders at track days, all the veteran riders at track days, and all the coaches and anybody who's a veteran, you need to become, you need to proselytize for the sport. You need to become a mentor. You need to say hello to the person who pulls in and they're going to take their new riders class. You need to say hello to them and go help them unload and welcome them, because there is a certain snottiness or looking down your nose at new riders, yet they have to be there for track days to grow. They have to be there for racing clubs to grow. I encourage everybody who is veteran and believes like we do and believes in the sport to become that person that walks up and joins people and helps people and gives them a thumbs up if you see them on the track and gives them a coaching tip that will help them. I really encourage that because you will bring them up to a fold. You make a new friend, and you will increase everything. And I'm asking all veterans to do that.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Nick. And like I said, you don't talk at them, you talk to them. And we're motorcyclists first, and your only purpose is going to help them. And because always remember, everyone out there, anybody who's listening to this, is they're afraid. They're showing up wanting to learn, but they're basically, there because they're struggling and they're afraid and it's difficult. And so if you come in with that attitude, you make them feel comfortable, then they can learn.
Okay, so as we wrap up, I know you guys are busy. You have things to do and places to go. I just really wanted to really thank you guys for spending the time to sit down, talk with us, share your insight into the world of racing and all these riding techniques. It's not often, I think, that some people of your level are so generous with that kind of information. For all you listening at home, if you're inspired to learn more about this stuff, I encourage you to check out the Yamaha Champ School online program, Champ U. They have two programs now, the Champ U Core, which has been around for about a year and a half, and they've just launched a brand new Champ U new rider program that is specifically designed for the brand new rider at the very beginning of their riding career, and it gives them techniques and concepts that the best riders in the world use to ride safely and confidently. And you can get a nice little discount when you sign up if you use coupon code FOCUS, FOCUS, FOCUS. Again, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on The Braking Zone.